visitors, I think it's probably worth kind of giving a little background of what y'all just got dropped into. We're here studying Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, and we're part of the way through Ezra. And Ezra really starts with the return of the Israelites from captivity back to Judea, within the nation of Israel. So we've 500-600 years before Christ BC. The Israelites were taken off into Babylonian captivity, and if I could talk today, and then the Persians overtook the Babylonians. And so you'll see, like in world history, the Babylonians were kind of on the decline. The Persians, through a couple of interesting wars, found themselves in power of a big swath. You see here a big swath of the world there. And through their kings, you can see God's influence over the nation of Israel. And you see God acting through those kings and allowing his people to return back to Judea, to Jerusalem and that surrounding area. So what were some of the other things we learned about that kind of were important about that secular history and then the spiritual history of the Jews returning back to what was originally the promised land?
God was true to his covenant with the Jews. And that's one of the reasons he acts in the nations of men to bring them back.
So which portion of this covenant sticks out to you?
Well,
I got one in my mind.
Yeah. To me, it goes back through Abraham and the promises to Abraham that through his seed the nations would be blessed. So therefore, God preserves his seed and preserves this remnant that we see returning to Judea, so that 400, 500 years in the future, the Messiah could come through this same manner.
Yeah. So you had the land, nation, and seed promises to Abraham, and the seed promise in particular is preserved because the Israelites, even through captivity, were able to retain their lineage. Many of them retain their lineage, particularly in the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. They were able to retain their lineage, and they returned. They were the remnant that was returned back under Babylonian captivity, back to restore the temple, to restore the walls. We're talking here in a little Ezra. We'll talk a little bit more about the walls in Nehemiah and Esther, which is kind of really in between all of that. I have a little trouble when I study this trying to figure out, okay, where am I from a timeline perspective? So I like to bring back timelines and think through that. We'll do that here in a little bit. So the seed promise was important, not only because the nation of Israel is preserved, but Jesus came from Bethlehem, right? And Bethlehem was not way over here in captivity. So I think there's a lot of things that kind of connect back together. You'll see God working through those kings and allowing his people to return, so much so that those kings are helping them return. They're giving them just about everything that they need to make that return. One of the things that I've always found interesting in the period of captivity was the people of Israel that were in captivity were not what I would have thought captivity would be like. I would have thought captivity was, taking big rocks and making little rocks or something like that, or serving some others. But they were just displaced people. They were displaced people, and then they really thrived. We saw in the first return, at the beginning of Ezra. We're going to start in chapter 7 tonight. And tonight we'll just start talking about Ezra. Like we haven't really talked about Ezra in chapters 1 through 6, but we'll just start talking about him here in chapter 7. And, the first return was under Zerubbabel. And it was probably about 80 years before, if my math is right, before Ezra returned. And there was probably around 50,000 people that returned. So that first batch was a good-sized batch. It was a small town, maybe a mid-sized city. So quite a few people made the journey from way over here in Babylon all the way back to the Jerusalem area of Judea. So let's start in chapter 7. We'll do a little bit of reading. This morning. We'll probably a little bit more than in a normal class I would have, because I think some of the items in here that we need to study today are important to read through. So if I could get a volunteer to read chapter 7, verses 1 through 10.
Now after these things, in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, there went up Ezra, son of Zariah, son of Azariah, son of Hilkiah, son of Shallum, son of Zadok, son of Anatub, son of Amariah, son of Azariah, son of Marioth. Anybody could have done this. I really wish you.
Oh yeah.
Son of Jeremiah, son of Uzzi.
You're a volunteer.
Abishai, Abishua, son of Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the chief priest. This Ezra went up from Babylon, and he was a scribe skilled in the law of Moses, which the law the Lord God of Israel had given. And the king granted him all he requested, because the hand of the Lord his God was upon him. Some of the sons of Israel and some of the priests, the Levites, the singers, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants went up to Jerusalem in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes. He came to Jerusalem in the 5th month, which was in the 7th year of the king. For on the first of the 1st month he began to go up from Babylon, and on the 1st of the 5th month he came to Jerusalem, because the good hand of his God was upon him. For Ezra had set his heart to study the law of the Lord, and to practice it, and to teach his statutes and ordinances in Israel.
So here we have in the reign of Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes was one of the Persian kings, and this is in his 7th year. So you can kind of piece some of the things together when you read different parts. And I'm going to say approximately 458. Those that have been in our class, John and I, just a lot of approximate on dates here. So who was Ezra? Who or what was Ezra? What do we learn about him? So he's a scribe.
Scribe is also a priest.
He's
Also a priest.
He's very careful to give his lineage here, genealogy. Tracing himself all the way back there.
Why was that so important to give his own lineage?
From the tribe of Levi to show his heritage there.
Yeah, to prove that he was a Levite and that he could be a priest. We had a lot of false priests, if you will, that kind of pop up through Israel's history that weren't Levites, right? Anything else that sticks out to you about him?
Verse 10, for he had prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord and to do it, and to teach statutes. I think that tells you a lot about his character.
Yeah, he was prepared, and he was looking forward and preparing for his work. So I agree. I think that's something that, not just to learn it, but to teach it. So he wanted to be a teacher. I think those are all good things.
Verse 6 is interesting too, where it says the king gave him all he asked for the hand of the Lord his God was on him. We see God acting throughout this whole thing, his providence acting, putting people in the right places, in contact with the king, and having a fair relationship with the king to get what the people need to go back and reestablish themselves.
And you see, even on the other side, you see Artaxerxes recognizes God was with him and was giving him everything that he wanted. So there was acknowledgement of God. Hard for me to understand whether Artaxerxes had true belief, because if you believe in God, then you can't believe in all the other gods that they had in that, I guess, climate back then. But I don't know that he was true to the one God or not, but he was very clearly supportive of Ezra through all this.
Well, we talked before that Josephus claims that Daniel had showed the prophecies to Cyrus, mentioning his name, and that's part of what predispositioned him toward the Jews. And it's very possible that some of these contemporaries also showed what was in God's word to these kings, and they would be impressed with those prophecies also that mention Cyrus and the return of the people and so on and so forth.
All right, next question. I did not write down my answer, so this is a good test. How long did it take him to travel from Jerusalem to Babylon? 4 months. 4 months. So they gathered before they traveled on a tributary to the Euphrates River. And what was one of the things they did right before they left? Sacrifices. Before they left? Not before they left, sorry.
Did they fast?
what else did they do?
They asked God to protect them on the journey.
Yeah, prayer.
They
Fasted prayer. And as Ezra's looking around at the couple thousand people he had gathered, what did he find?
No priests.
No priests.
Levites.
No Levites. He didn't find any family members, right? Because he was a Levite. And so what did he do?
He sent for some.
Yeah, we need some Levites to go back with us. And so I think that's just, life application today. Like if we find ourselves, in a situation where we don't have something that God requires or God expects out of us, what do we do? There's a life application here today. You got to fix it, right? You just can't continue. All right. So what was Ezra's primary purpose in his return?
Teach people the law.
Teach people the law. So part of his preparation was to teach. He wasn't going back with purpose of rebuilding a wall or with establishing, certain number of people there. Because he goes back with very few people relative to the 50,000 originally. His purpose was to teach. So if he's going to go back and teach the law, he kind of needs some Levites, right? They looked around and didn't find it. All right. Timeline here just to kind of help reorient all of ourselves. The Jerusalem fell 587, and then the southern kingdom was taken into captivity. And in 536, the last couple of weeks been studying about Zerubbabel and the first return. That's when about 50,000 people went back in 536, 538-ish. And then we're here in about 457, 458, around where Ezra returns to Jerusalem after that long journey. And so you'll see here in the middle, as I mentioned earlier, Esther's kind of like right in the middle of all this. So we're going to study Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. So we're hopping around a little bit. And for my brain, I have to kind of keep going back to the timeline and figuring out where am I, because it's easy to get things twisted around. So we are probably 58 years, I think, after the temple was completed. So we talked a little bit about that last week and how the temple was being worked on, and it was completed. And here we are with a second return. Another timeline that I've shown before, just to kind of give you a reminder of where we're at within the world history. We're here under Artaxerxes. I don't have the pointer. No, I don't need one. Artaxerxes, and notice there's more than one Artaxerxes. There's an Artaxerxes 1 and a 2. And so we're here kind of at Artaxerxes 1. It's after the temple's rebuilt. It's before Nehemiah. The Persians are in power. Obviously, they've taken over from the Babylonians. And the bottom section's on Egypt if you're interested in what's going on in Egypt. You all will be familiar with lots of those, but it's hard for me to kind of keep all that straight. All right, so genealogies. We've got a little bit of genealogies in here, right? We have son of this person, son of that person, and we go back to Aaron, and that was 16 generations. In 2 Kings 25:18, the material refers back to this. How many generations, did we see there? Did y'all look at that in your studies? You can open a door if you need to. The thermostat's in the other room, so it's probably cold in there. Yeah. So there's one generation mentioned here, Azariah, son of Marioth. I guess my question wasn't leading enough. But First Chronicles 6 generations were mentioned of the same people. So one of the things that I find interesting about that is, like, I think most of us know that when we study genealogies, they're not always referring to the direct father. Well, how do we know that? Well, we can see right here where you've got a genealogy in one place and a genealogy in another place. It's the same people, but there's some generations skipped. So I think that's something that pops up here that was interesting to me. All right, we're going to probably spend a little time today on Artaxerxes' letter to Ezra. So I told you a minute ago we're going to do a little bit of reading today. Let's go to chapter 7, beginning in verse 11. And the first thing we see in this section is a reference to the God of heaven. And in verse 12, Artaxerxes, king of kings, to Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of the God of heaven. So the first thing I notice out of this letter is Artaxerxes, writing this letter to Ezra, acknowledges God as the God of heaven. I find that the reflected God in different towns, different places, different cities. He's acknowledging God as God of heaven. I just found that really interesting. And I think that's mostly probably God working through those kings. I don't know how much Artaxerxes had to do with that, but God's working through him. All right, what were some of the key privileges, instructions, or points that you all found in the letter to
So right off the bat, he said, anybody who wants to go can go.
Anybody who wants to go can go.
One of the ones I liked is if you got things from other areas, you didn't have to pay taxes.
Yeah, that was nice. No tribute, no tolls, no taxes. Yeah.
Gave them ability to basically delegate legal status. So he gave them a lot of power to designate people in charge.
Yeah, toward the end of the letter, he gives him authority to put people in power. We're going to take section by section on this letter today and just kind of think through that. It's important, I think, to study the letter and what authority he's given Ezra. Who would like to read verses 11 through 16? Was that an offer to read?
No, I'm not going to read. I have a question.
I'll get you the genealogies later.
No. When you said God of heaven, that was really interesting. And I think, today if you ask people, let's just say in the U.S., God, the God of heaven, most people might say yes. But yet, I think the God of heaven that we understand sitting in this room might be different than the neighborhood behind us. Could that be like Artaxerxes? You might admit that he's the God of heaven, but how much do I follow him? How much do I do what he says? How much do I really seek him?
Yeah, that's a thought. I'm not sure. I think today more people question whether there is a God. I see that. You see that in schools and what they're teaching kids. I think there's more people questioning it, and it's more, from my interactions with people, it's more tradition than anything. Because if you truly believe, then would you not do? Would you not follow? So, I don't know, that's just kind of my thoughts on it.
I guess I'm thinking of family members who will readily attend a church service and say, yes, there's a God, but there are other things to believe.
That they may not behave in a way that there is one, right? Yeah. That could very well be the case.
You have people who are familiar with God.
Yeah.
And Artaxerxes and his Persian kings were familiar with God. They would necessarily follow him. But they knew the stories, probably all the way back to Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
They may have known what happened to Nebuchadnezzar for those 7 years as he lived like an animal. And when he came back, he may have turned to the God of heaven. They may have known the stories of the handwriting on the wall, right before they took over. Probably knew what happened to Daniel in the lion's den. These kings, they kept pretty good records. If they didn't have it in the king's records, they certainly would have heard these stories, and they would have known that was attributed to a powerful God. But they saw a lot of powerful gods they followed.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You even saw, we read into 2 Chronicles a couple weeks ago, and how that flows into Ezra, and there's some thought that these may have been connected, like back then we had scrolls, and you kind of run out of paper, that it's a pattern of how history was recorded outside the Bible where you would kind of end one and start the next with the same wording, and because you kind of run out of a tablet or a scroll, and that's kind of how 2 Chronicles and Ezra kind of may connect together. But that's connecting back to the king. So they had good records, and they knew, and so you had to, if you were an observer of history, you would know there's something about these people. They're still around. There's a remnant left, and they're able to trace their lineage back. There's something different about them than maybe the rest. When you have one major power overtaking another over and over and over through history. This is only a couple hundred years of history, and lots of world power change, world power shift. Great point. So,
I'll read.
You'll read?
Mike's already taken the hard reading.
Okay. 11 through 16.
This is a copy of the letter that King Artaxerxes gave to Ezra the priest, the scribe, a man learned in matters of the commandments of the Lord and his statutes for Israel. Artaxerxes, king of kings, to Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of the God of heaven, peace. And now I make decree that any one of the people of Israel, or their priests, or Levites in my kingdom, who freely offers to go to Jerusalem may go with you. For you are sent by the king and his 7 counselors to make inquiries about Judah and Jerusalem, according to the law of your God, which is in your hand. And also carry the silver and gold that the king and his counselors have freely offered to the God of Israel, whose dwelling is in Jerusalem, with all the silver and gold that you shall find in the whole province of Babylonia, and with the freewill offerings of the people and the priests, vowed willingly for the house of their God that is in Jerusalem.
So I already mentioned anyone that could go. But what authority did they have when they went? Were they just going if they wanted to go? What authority is given to them here? Who are they sent by? The king. The king of Persia. And I had to step back. This is a big place. This isn't just like some small. This is like a major world power. Maybe it's not the world power of that time. And the king has sent Ezra and his people back. And this is a letter from that king. And so I just kind of had to step back and think about this is pretty powerful here just in that itself. So that's what we're going to study about, some of the key elements of this letter and how powerful they are. So what can they take with them? Heard somebody say something?
Silver and gold.
Silver and gold. I couldn't hear you over the fan. Yeah. So the silver and gold. So they're given silver and gold. Something's worth a lot, right? So they're given a fair amount of funds to go back.
It says that at least in the New American Standard, it says that all the silver and gold that you find in the whole province of Babylon.
That's a lot of gold, right? We'll do some probably Wednesday. We get to that. We're going to do some math on the amount of silver and gold that they had, and test everyone's math skills. See how much it's worth and how heavy it all was. So if you want to prepare for Wednesday, do a little bit of math. Sharpen up your pencil, I guess. Anything else stick out to you that's a key provision in this letter from the king?
Verse 15 says that the king and his counselors have freely offered gold and silver as well. So, that's
not what you can find, but
right.
They're giving their own money,
right.
Their own funds. You gotta remember, these are people that were in captivity, and they were being given gold and silver as they left. Now they're going to another controlled territory, Judea, but they were given funds to go back. That's pretty powerful. All right, next section. Who wants to read 17 through 20? Dan?
With this money, therefore, you shall diligently buy bulls, rams, and lambs, with their grain offerings and their libations, and offer them on the altar of the house of your God which is in Jerusalem. Whatever seems good to you and your brothers to do with the rest of the silver and gold, you may do according to the will of your God. And also the utensils which are given to you for the service of the house of God, deliver in full before the God of Jerusalem. And the rest of the needs of the house of your God, for which you may have occasion to provide it for from the royal treasury.
All right, what are the key privileges that they get out of this section from the king? Yeah, money, more money. They also get some instructions here as well. They were told to go use some of the money to buy animals to sacrifice. So God's hand in this section as well. You know, you go back. Remember, Ezra's mission here is a spiritual mission. He's going back to teach the law. So he's going to go show up at the temple. He's going to have animals that have been funded by the king to go sacrifice to the Lord.
Verse 20, I wonder how they were to get that money from the royal treasury if they needed it.
Good question. I think he's had a letter, and the letter probably had a seal on it. And
Along the way, or whatever.
I mean, he had a blank checkbook.
He could go to the governor of the province with his letter that basically was a royal draft that said you can draw this much out of the royal.
It's a blank check. It's a blank check. It's a blank check. I mean,
I thought it was.
anybody ever been given a blank check before, like this big?
Verse 22, there was seemed to be some kind of limit on some of the things they were able to get later, but yeah, up to 100 talents.
Right. Yeah, there's maybe some limitation there, but here it's whatever you need, it's going to come from the king's treasury. That's kind of the guidance. Yeah.
And he specifies several times that this is for the house of your God that is in Jerusalem. It's for the support and the worship of the house. And he's going to ask later, just like Darius did earlier, to pray for him and his sons in this house of God that's in Jerusalem. So,
one of the things that's notable is a lot of times, hey, whatever's left over, bring it back and put it back in the treasury. But they say whatever's left over, use however you need it to use it.
Yeah, see whatever you see fit. So there was a lot of trust there that was given to Ezra. So there was some trust between the king and Ezra. The king usually wouldn't give that kind of authority out to it, except for his most trusted advisors.
And one thing that kind of strikes me is the whole letter and all here. Of course, he talks about, the God of in heaven. And then he talks about, being able to take the gold and silver and the buy bulls for all the bulls and lambs, for the offering and, the vessels for the temple and stuff. It's like, he's awful familiar with the way that the Jews worship.
Yeah.
And the way, what they believe. He has a real clear understanding, how they worship and how they believe, what they believe. That just kind of strikes me, that he'd have that much knowledge of their religion.
Yeah, he clearly, Mark's comment was he clearly had some knowledge of how the Jews worshipped and what they believed and the things that they would need to be able to provide funds for those items. So I think that's a great observation. Like I could go look at some other types of religions today, and I wouldn't know what they do there if I've never been exposed to it or experienced it or studied it. Like I wouldn't know what they would need, but clearly the king did.
And just another example of how God, when the Israelites left Egypt, they were given everything they needed. Here, God's providing everything.
They were given everything again. Once again, they were given everything they needed. All right. Next section, 21 to 24.
And I, even I, ordered Xerxes the king to issue a decree to all the treasurers who are in the region beyond the river, that whatever Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of the God of heaven may require of you, let it be done diligently, up to 100 talents of silver, 100 cores of wheat, 100 baths of wine, 100 baths of oil, and salt without prescribed limit. Whatever is commanded by the God of heaven, let it diligently be done for the house of God of heaven. For why should there be wrath against the realm of the king and his son? Also, we inform you that it shall not be lawful to impose tax, or tribute, or custom on any of the priests, Levites, singers, gatekeepers, Nethinim, or servants of this house of God.
So Dan hit this earlier, but no tax, you know. But I also think just in their journey back, you know, you were walking across someone else's property. I mean, you were passing through other people's territories. You had to camp on the side of the road. You know, you weren't just, you know, taking a flight over. It's a 4-month journey. And so people would charge you, they would tax you, they tried to extort some money from you, they take advantage of travelers. And that's another thing you didn't really see. That Ezra, he didn't take an army with him to protect himself on the journey. He expected God. He prayed before they left that God would protect them. And so I find that also interesting that, you know, he's going to have this letter. No, you can't tax me. No, you can't charge me for staying here. No, you can't do this. Like the whole journey back was even covered. So that's, again, I think God's providence and care through the king. And instructions out to all the treasurers. Anything else in that section that you all know?
John, we studied, repetition, before. One word that kind of jumped out back in verse 17. Not only did it have the instructions of what to do, but it says, "You shall do with all diligence." And again, repeated this here again in verse 21. Let it be done with all diligence. So it wasn't just what to do, but it was the attitude and respect and how to do it.
Do it right. Don't halfway do it. You're going to do it right. That was the instruction from the king. Yeah.
He clarifies again, though, verse 23 says, he breaks it down even further. He gives Ezra a lot of power, but then he says it, I think, a little bit more clearly, that whatever is decreed by the God of heaven, let it be done. So his intent is really that God be served, it seems, and it's not just that Ezra has the power, he wants God served. It's really fascinating to see it from a secular viewpoint, consider his Artaxerxes.
Yeah.
But doesn't it, the rest of the 23, his reason for doing it, so why should there be wrath against the realms of the king of Persia? He's doing it for himself.
Yeah, well, he wanted them to pray for him and his sons, and he, a little afraid, I think, of the God of heaven.
He has seen the results of disobedience, and he's protected them.
Good. Yep. Again, another pattern that continues, right? We've talked about that. Lots of patterns in the scriptures. All right, last section here of the letter. Who would like to read that? Just 2 verses. No genealogy. I can do that. Okay, you can do that? All right, I do that.
And you, Ezra, according to your God-given wisdom, set magistrates and judges who may judge all the people who are in the region beyond the river, all such as know the laws of your God, and teach those who do not know them. Whoever will not observe the law of your God and the law of the king, let judgment be executed speedily on him, whether it be by death or banishment or confiscation of goods or imprisonment.
All right, so what was the last set of instructions the king gave Ezra for the return? Set up a government, pick some judges out, gave him authority to pick some people to judge Judea.
Teach the law to those who don't know it.
Teach the law to those that don't know it. I mean, how many times have you ever heard someone somewhere in the modern era say, "Yeah, go teach some other people your religion that don't know that your religion."
And if they don't want to, execute them.
Execute judgment. And what kind of judgment was it? Was it just be easy on them, or pretty strict judgment? That's probably the most striking section of all this to me, because I could maybe get my head around, okay, maybe he's afraid of God. They're gonna, he's got lots of money, give him whatever he wants, send him back to keep peace or whatever. I could maybe argue some of that, but I've never seen anybody say, go teach some other people your religion that don't know your religion. I've just never seen that. Maybe that exists. I've just never seen that. Most people are trying to convert people to their own religion, or they're trying to establish and further their cause, but to establish someone else's religion and cause, I've just never seen. So this last piece about teaching those that don't know the law is pretty I mean, that's God's providence, clearly, through that.
Do you think there's something in, it's kind of in relation to what you're saying, like verse 12, he said, he calls himself King of Kings, and then how that kind of comes out here at the end there, is he lifting himself up there, or is that, maybe he's recognizing that God's given him a unique seat?
I don't know, I haven't studied enough
Reading too much into
secular history to know how Artaxerxes behaved outside of Scripture, to know God's view.
They regarded themselves as the top of the top, and they would basically garner to them any of the religions that seemed to be of benefit to them. They were very tolerant towards religions that would obey the virgin rule, but when he calls himself the King of Kings, he's calling himself the top of the top. Mm-hmm. And that's the way they regarded it.
Yeah, they kind of went with the flow, I guess, religiously. They would kind of go with the flow with whatever was the trend, whatever seemed to be working for someone else. Anything else that you all pick up out of this letter? I think this is the thrust of the lesson today, is kind of the letter and what we learned. How do we apply anything in here to ourselves today that we may not have talked about yet? What do you take away from it?
I like what Joe was talking about earlier, the diligence at which we've been given a commission by God to do something, and that word diligence there, it means exacting. We have been given a very specific task ourselves as Christians to obey, and God expects us to do the same thing in following it out, like Artaxerxes did for Ezra here.
Yeah. To kind of do it and do it right, do it with energy, do it properly, don't wait around. Lee?
To me, out of these, we covered this morning, what Stan had, I think, the attitude of Ezra, and it's something that we need to mimic. Cindy mentioned it a while ago in verse 10, that he prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord. And I think it's important for us to notice the order that he did these things. He decided he was going to do it himself first, that he was going to find out what God wanted. And then he was going to begin to do what God wanted. And then he was going to teach it to others.
Which was his mission.
Right.
And so I go back to that little scene beside the river where the Levites at. I need some Levites, right? And he had to go send and get some Levites to go back to fulfill that mission, to do it right.
Something that happens. We have to prepare our minds. We have to prepare ourselves. Decide that that's what we want to do. That we want to serve God. A lot of people go through life thinking they're Christians, and they've never really decided that they're going to serve God.
Yeah. And everybody here prepared to come, and we prepared and chose to serve God. And that's what we need to continue to do each and every day of our lives. That's what they were doing, and that's a real good application. You can make a lesson out of that one. Anything else?
We kind of see some parallels of the commission of Ezra, and also in what Jesus talks about in Mark 16. So you got teaching and instruction. We're given in Mark 16, he who believes and is baptized shall be saved. He who is not is condemned. We get a very much similar structure. Those who aren't going to be taught, you execute judgment against them. So you start seeing some parallels in those two. God is going to be the ultimate one who condemns in Mark, but we have a limited judgment right here of Ezra. You've been instructed to teach God's commandments. Those who don't, judgment.
Yeah. Well, each were sent for a mission, a role, right? They had a primary mission, if I can use that word. And I think that's kind of what we look at today. Like we all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses, and we're all going to be good at certain things, and we should use those things for part of God's mission. But it doesn't mean we can skip over the other things. We're all given something to do. What else?
There's a real strong evidence of the providence of God here to fulfill what he wants to happen, because the Jews historically were troublesome people to the world powers. The Greeks followed the Persians. They were troublesome to the Greeks. The Romans followed the Greeks. They were troublesome to the Romans, but here they are. The Babylonians treat them with great favor, and it's God behind all of that that's doing that, because he wants to accomplish his purpose of reestablishing them back in the land of promise and reestablish the genealogy. So it's really strong, the providence of God that we see here throughout all of these books, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther.
And I think this section here in particular is the providence of God through the nations and the kings that are around them. And we've seen, again, patterns. We've seen God use nations around Israel back when they had kings to go in and destroy parts of them and to punish them. But this is another level, I think, of God's influence. It's direct influence on the most powerful rulers in the entire world to send his people back with anything and everything they need for a spiritual purpose.
So God will accomplish his purposes today, and we just need to play our part.
Yeah. Great application. Yeah. And to some degree, we got to accept God is in control. We have to accept that. We're not the ones in control. We have to accept that God's in control.
I hadn't thought about it until you said it earlier, but Ezra didn't have any family. That's fascinating. He was ready no matter what. He was by himself. He had the people with him, but he didn't have his, he was the only Levite ready to work. So there's a lesson inside that in itself. If you're by yourself and your task given to you, go do it with all diligence.
I don't know if he had a wife or children, but he didn't have any, priests. He didn't have any cousins or anything like that, right?
So we're really going to go back.
Yeah. All right. So last question here for this morning. How did Ezra respond after receiving this letter? I mean, put yourself in his place. Like, how would you respond if you got this letter and you were given this mission? How does Ezra respond? Praise God.
And took strength himself from what the king had allowed him to do under God's providence.
Yeah.
Think about just the expression of gratitude. Blessed be the Lord who has put such a thing as this in the king's heart, and has extended his loving kindness to us, or to me. I think about, often good things happen and we don't think I took care of it. This is what a good lesson in just expressing gratitude to the Lord for even thinking of someone like me.
How many of you all been given a project or something like that at work, but then your boss never supported you, or they didn't give you the resources you needed to accomplish what you were told to do?
Responsibility without authority.
It's kind of hard, isn't it? Like those of the work have probably experienced that a few times, and here you think I try to put myself in Ezra's position. He's going to lead a couple thousand people back. He's got a spiritual purpose. He's got to walk like 1,000 miles. Like, I think I need to be encouraged just to go walk 1,000 miles. But he's got a mission, to go do these things, and he's got support from the king through God, and he's got anything and everything he needs. Ever needs to be accomplished. Like, there's no excuse. He has no excuse. So he's encouraged. I'd be encouraged, if I was at work given that project, and whatever you need, people, resources, whatever you need, go do it. It'd be encouraging, right? I can do this. I have a chance. I know what the mission is. I can go accomplish it if you're given the resources. He had everything he needed, so there was no excuse for Ezra.
But he's only going to walk 10 miles today.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day. It's every morning you get up.
But it's it's a doable.
Yeah.
Doable
He probably
step.
slept on the ground too.
Without an air.
For 4 months without an air mattress. They didn't have air mattresses back then.
I think it probably was a big encouragement to Ezra because he had prepared his heart to serve God. Right? If you told somebody who didn't want to do this, hey, look at all this work you've just been signed up for, they would not have the reaction that Ezra did in his letter. Someone who doesn't want to walk 1,000 miles and teach everybody these laws and set up judges and reestablish society. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's only a blessing. Well, it's always a blessing, but you're only going to view it as a blessing. That's what you want.
Yeah. I think we see, encouragement today in Scripture for our mission today as well. So that's another, I think, a lesson that we can take here is that we should be encouraged by all those people around us. It's why we're here today, to build each other up, right? It's one of the reasons we assemble. So there's others that are in a situation like us, other believers as a group that have a mission, a purpose, and we're here trying to serve God. we're not walking 1,000 miles, but we're going to encounter some difficulty along the way. We've got everything we need, right? What else do we need besides God's word? All right, well, we'll continue lesson 3 on Wednesday.
You've been here. Where are you from? Nashville. Well, there's a lot of people here that are related to him. You need to get to know that team. Today is special. A lot of how long are you on study? They're leaving. Okay. So they're going to go visit their